Welcome into Flag for Discussion, episode 23 for Thursday, September 4th. My name is Farbod Markazi. He is Jace Hatfield. It's a Thursday show. That means it's a preview show. We got the week 2 slate preview today. Michigan, Oklahoma, obviously, is included in that. Michigan's heading to Norman. Sherrone Moore's heading home to play his alma mater. This is also that game that Michigan conveniently left out of the self-imposed 3-game suspension they put on Sherrone Moore so he can coach against his former team. We got the CyHawk game. We got Iowa State. Rocco Becht versus Mark Gronowski. Matt Campbell versus Kirk Ferentz. Huge game. I know we got a couple of our listeners who really want to know our takes on this specific game. And then Shot in the Bark. It's our underdog picks segment. We debuted the segment last week. This week it's got a freshly minted name. And we got a lot of fun picks and stuff towards the end of the show. Before we get into anything, make sure you're following us, subscribe to us on YouTube at Flag for Discussion, on Apple Podcasts and Spotify at Flag for Discussion, Twitter at F for Discussion, and on TikTok at Flag4 Discussion. Jace, I know that this week isn't as sexy of a slate as last week, or supposedly that's what the talking heads want to tell us. I have a feeling that whenever games are like this or weeks are like this, there's even more chaos that people aren't expecting, and we're going to have an even more crazy Sunday recap show than we did last week.
Yeah, it feels like whenever people are sleeping on the slate, that's when you get the craziest upsets and you find out who's the real deal and who's not. And there's a lot of teams that have sleeper games, and good coaches don't let you sleep on a game, but not great coaches sometimes let you sleep on a game, and that's when you slip up. We'll see if one of our Shot in the Bark picks can get one of those right.
Exactly. But we're going to get to all of those picks shortly. Jace, why don't you go through our picks so far this season?
Yep. All right. So far in our, we pick 5 of the biggest games of the week, and Farbod and I are going to pick them. We'll do that each week. So in the big game picks, Farbod is 7-3. You've shown great consistency, going 4-1 week 1, 3-2 last week. Last week was a tough slate to pick. I had a great week 1, starting off 4-1. A rough week 2, going 1-4 to put me at 500 at 5-5. With our Shot in the Bark, so the way we're doing this, you get 1 point if your underdog covers. You get 2 additional points if they win outright. So 3 is the most. You can get 1 if they cover. You get 0 if nothing happens. Unfortunately, Farbod, the Syracuse Orange did not get it done for you. They almost had a backdoor late in the game, but they did not, leaving you at 0 points. Side remark, but Joey Aguilar looked really good. And there's potential that people forgot that he is a very experienced quarterback, and he had great numbers at App State. He looks like he didn't miss a beat, so good for him in that game. Unfortunately, it came to the demise of your Qs. And then I got 1 point. Toledo hung in there with Kentucky, kept it close all game. Couldn't get over the hump. Toledo just didn't have the firepower, the juice in the trenches, and it showed. They couldn't get to the quarterback. They couldn't really protect their quarterback very well, Gleason. But on the flip side, Kentucky just looked bad, letting Toledo stay in there. So thank you, Toledo, for that singular point. I will gladly take that. And then the parlay. So each week, Farbod and I are going to be doing a 4-leg parlay of just picks that we liked for the week, see if we can hit. We doing the math. We're going to do $5 together on each one. As long as one of these hits, high rollers. As long as one of these hits, it'll make the money for the year and make us a little extra change. And then anything that hits beyond that is cherry on top. Week 1, we were close. We went 3 for 4 on the legs, but obviously it's a parlay, so no cash for us. I'm still going to be bitter on the Iowa State, Kansas State.
I'm so mad about that one.
On that. So that would have been week 1 we would have hit. And then last week we went 2 for 2 on legs. We had a decent call, just some tough beats with in the Baylor-Auburn game. But yes, now we sit here at 0-2 on the parlays, 5 for 8 on those legs. I like our picks for this week. We'll obviously get to those later, but I'm excited for that.
There's a ton to talk about. And one of the reasons we give you the recap of our picks so far at the start of every show is because this whole show is going to be talking about the games and talking about what we think is going to happen against the spread, money line. So there's a ton of picks that are yet to be made. Let's start off with the game I mentioned at the beginning of the show. Michigan's heading to Norman. Sherrone Moore's heading home. Michigan's playing number 18 Oklahoma, 5.5 who's a 5.5-point favorite, Saturday, 7:30 Eastern on ABC. This is obviously the game I mentioned that Sherrone Moore conveniently they left out of his self-imposed suspension so he can play and coach against Oklahoma. But I think that is only a side story to this. I think last week we saw Bryce Underwood, while it was his first career start, and you could probably nitpick some of the things they did against New Mexico because it was only New Mexico, and they probably should have killed him a little bit more. I think he looked settled in. And then on the other side, you have John Mateer, who came over with Ben Arbuckle from Washington State, who, like you said it last show, had the best week of any QB1 last week. A massive matchup here. Do we like Sherrone Moore's offense or Venables' defense? Where are we on this game?
Yeah, I think it's going to be an interesting game. One note I wanted to make too, Venables was the defensive coordinator when Sherrone Moore played there, but Sherrone Moore was
That's
he was
ridiculous. I didn't
yeah,
realize that.
They different sides of the ball, so they wouldn't have. They asked Venables about it, and he had a nice quote. He said, like, I didn't coach him much just because he was on the other side of the ball. Cited his leadership as something that the team as a whole rallied around. So, good quote. I think there's a lot of love between the two of them, I have to imagine. I'm excited to see what Bryce Underwood looks like in his first big road game. Like you said, I think he looked way more poised and polished than I thought he would. Seeing some of the highlights of some of the throws he made, looks like he was able to throw on the run, throw with some zip, a little bit of touch. All those things he's going to need when he plays Oklahoma. I think I'm most looking forward to Venables and what he schemes up as a defensive mind against Bryce Underwood and Justice Haynes. I think Justice Haynes looked really good against New Mexico, and I think Michigan's going to have to rely on him and need him a lot in this game. I don't think Michigan's game plan is going to be, hey, let's make Bryce throw the football 35 times and try and outmatch Arbuckle and Mateer. I don't think that's when as Pac-12 guys, we saw how teams fanned out when they did that against Washington State. Never worked. If you want to beat Washington State in that offense, you've got to slow the game down. You have to control the time of possession. You have to keep them off on the sidelines. Exactly, yeah. And keep your defense healthy and full, rested. So I think Justice Haynes going to be the big X factor for Michigan in this game. Can Michigan get him going? Can they keep him involved? Even in the screen game with Bryce. But I do think Bryce is probably going to have a big moment or two if Michigan's going to want to win this game. He looks like he's capable of it. It would be kind of fun to see him pull off a crazy play or two.
Yeah.
He looks like he's going to be just an absolute stud. This could be his breaking out game, but I do think for Michigan's point of view, it probably falls on Justice Haynes there.
I think, to your point, it falls on Justice Haynes, not just because he's a great player, but that's because that's Michigan's offense since the Jim Harbaugh era started. And you can tell me Jim Harbaugh's not there anymore. It's a different coach. His offensive coordinator, former offensive line coach, is the head coach now. This is the same. They're trying to root and shoot for the same philosophy that they had under Harbaugh. So they're never going to be a quarterback-centric team. And like you said, if Bryce Underwood throws 35 times this game, I'm going to know that Michigan lost. If you tell me that right now, because that's never Michigan's game plan to throw the ball that much, right? So Justice Haynes, you can tell me it's New Mexico. I also think New Mexico is a pretty good team for their level. So there's people who say, oh, he ran for that many yards against New Mexico. They're pretty solid. Where I lie here is, how will the rest of Michigan's offense stack up? Because Brent Venables is a really good defensive coach. And last year, people had a lot of jokes to make about Oklahoma. What they couldn't joke about is the fact that the defense kept them in games. But eventually, the offense was so paltry, so bad, so had so many 3-and-outs, just quick turnovers here and there, that the defense couldn't catch a break. And eventually they gave up some games that they probably shouldn't have. I think when you're considering Brent Venables' defense, that's what I'm so excited to watch against the true freshman quarterback, against a team that, yes, they have Justice Haynes, they have a good offensive line still, they have the true freshman star quarterback. I'm not in love with any of Michigan's receivers. Their skill talent is pretty lacking right now. And not that it was any great before then, in the Harbaugh era or in the year that they won the Natty. But at the same time, that year they had guys who are in the NFL now. So I'm curious to see how far that offense can go against Brent Venables this week.
Yeah, they have the four-star wide receiver Channing Goodwin from 2 years ago. He's a sophomore now. Then you have 3-star Samaj Morgan from Michigan. He's a senior. I think they're going to need one of those two wide receivers to step up and at least keep pace, make plays for them. The tight end Marlon Klein, I believe he's from Germany. He's a 6'6", 250. He looks like a beast last week against New Mexico. And I think like Michigan's just kind of always has pretty dang solid tight ends, if not great. So I think he just is going to be another one of those. And you can probably rely on him. You can probably rely on Justice Haynes to have good games. I do think Michigan's going to need one of those two wide receivers to step up if they're going to hang in there with Oklahoma. And then on the flip side of the football, Oklahoma offensively, big name in the transfer portal they got this past offseason was Jay Knott. We didn't really see much of him, though, week one. Venables has been asked about it. It sounds like he like hinted at maybe an injury concern, but then kind of dismissed it also by saying that was a preseason thing. He just didn't get a practice. We'll see what happens because we've seen Washington. A reason why I'm referencing Washington State, yeah, Arbuckle and Mateer come from there. When they lost games, they could not close games out because they couldn't run the ball, and they would just still try to throw late in fourth quarters, throw an incomplete pass, you throw another one, take a sack, throw a pick. They would lose these games where they got late leads in the fourth quarter and they just couldn't sustain them because they couldn't run the football. Michigan's a good defensive team. You're going to have to figure out a way to run the football if you're going to want to win this game. Is that Jay Knott? Is that somebody else? We'll have to see. But you can't, if you're Arbuckle, you cannot lose another game where you're up 14 with 5 minutes left. I'm saying this as an Oregon Duck fan. We were on the good end of this where they had Cam Ward throwing screens and slants. They're up 14 late in the game, and it resulted in a pick six and a lot of incompletions that saved us timeouts and time. Allow the Ducks to come back and win. We've seen it before. Michigan's a dang good team. You can't get away with closing that game out if you're not going to run the.
I just think I completely agree with you. I don't know how much Jay Knott is going to be a difference maker in this game in general. Michigan lost a lot defensively to the draft last year, but they still hold up and stack up well defensively. I mean, we talked about them last year. Their biggest issue was the fact that they couldn't have a player or quarterback who could throw the forward pass. Their tight end had the most receiving yards on their team by a long shot last year. And that was basically their offense, hoping that it would work. I am most excited, though, to watch John Mateer against, not that Illinois State wasn't a real defense, but to watch John Mateer and Ben Arbuckle cook a little bit against a real defense. I want to see how that offense goes because that's how you and I will. This is going to be a good barometer to how you and I think Oklahoma will be for the rest of the season too, because obviously last week they went off. There was nothing that was slowing them down, stopping them. But what we talked about heading into this year is last year Oklahoma had their top 5 starting receivers injured. Last year Oklahoma hired a terrible offensive coordinator. Last year Oklahoma had no identity on the offensive side of the ball. This year they brought in Ben Arbuckle, they brought in John Mateer, and those receivers that were hurt last year are healthy now. Let's see how they can stack up, because if they stack up well here, I'm not even saying blow them out because this is going to be a game. But if they stack up well, they can score on Michigan, whether it's in a win or a loss. I would feel pretty good about them going into their SEC schedule. They got a really hard SEC schedule, but I think one of the reasons I'm excited in general is I trust that the defense will be there. But if the offense is there, that'll make me really excited for the rest of the season.
Yeah, I think these are two teams looking to get back to where they're used to being, which is the top of college football. Down years last year, Oklahoma, down years last couple. I think this is a big game to prove who's back. I don't even want to say who's not, because if they both look good, probably both of them. There's a very real scenario. Both these teams are fighting for playoff spots coming the end of the year, and this could be the game that kicks one of them out and puts the other one in. I doesn't mess with the conference standings, but I do think that at the end of the season, one of these teams could look at this game and they would be thanking themselves for playing it because it's the reason why they got in, and the other team might be looking at it angry they played it because it's the reason why they're not. I do think this has kind of big implications.
Do you want to save our pick for our pick segment, or do you want to give me who you think is going to win or cover?
We'll save it for the pick segment. We won't do a breakdown at that point, but we'll save it for then.
Bottom line, I think this game is going to be really fun, and this is obviously probably the top game for everyone to watch this weekend. But if you aren't a Michigan or Oklahoma fan, haven't been following this, check out Bryce Underwood. He's going to be pretty cool. And then check out John Mateer. See how, like you said, Justice Haynes is going to be a huge key in this game.
Yeah. What he does might determine how the output of this game.
If Justice Haynes runs all over Oklahoma, all over Brent Venables' defense the way he did against New Mexico, or even 80% of that, I would be I would change my expectations for Michigan this year. And two, I would be pretty sad about my expectations for Oklahoma because I picked them to be pretty special this season. Let's move on to a game that I know you and I are very excited about. I know a lot of people in the Midwest are very excited about. It's the CyHawk game. Iowa is heading to play number 16 Iowa State. Iowa State's a 1.5 point favorites on Saturday at noon Eastern on Fox. Jace, this is right in your ballpark. I want you to take the ball here.
Okay. I have to give a lot of credit here to one of our great listeners, close friend, and Beyonce's cousin, Logan Shanks, for a lot of his input and insight into this game as well. So the CyHawk game, I think it's been a big game in the state of Iowa and expanded a little bit in the Midwest. This is one of the first times in a while, I think it's like a nationally recognized game from everybody, in part due to we don't have the best slate on paper this week. But I also think both these programs are becoming high profile enough that people are starting to recognize the names from rankings and from talk shows. So it's kind of fun to see this game get the spotlight. But in terms of what I expect in this game, so Iowa, as always under Kirk Ferentz, they're going to have a really good O-line. They're going to have a really good D-line. And that was true. They looked the part week one. It looks like going to the Iowa State game, that's going to be the case. Iowa State's offensive line has struggled a little bit. They struggled a little bit against Kansas State. They looked a little bit better against South Dakota last week. They still weren't able to run the ball. That's 2 straight weeks of not running the ball, one of them against South Dakota. It does give you a little bit of pause if you're Iowa State not being able to run the ball. And then defensive line, it's teams have run the ball pretty successfully on the D-line. And then they also haven't generated much pressure in either of the 2 games they've played. I think that's where this game, to me, the CyHawk game is who owns the trenches and then who plays like they're the underdog. Not necessarily who is the underdog, but who plays like it. It's one of those games to be 2 very evenly matched teams. It's like the Kirby Smart mentality of even if you're Iowa State, even if we are the favorites, how can I make my guys believe that they are not? What do I need to do to make everybody play like they're being doubted? Nobody believes in them. And I think whoever comes out with that mentality is going to play tougher football and probably win this game. That doesn't go to say there's one big name we haven't mentioned yet, and that's Rocco Becht. And he could be, he is the best football player on that field on Saturday. And I think it's going to come down. Yeah. If he makes plays, there's a world where Iowa just can't keep up. Because are you a believer that Iowa's passing game has really taken the step up like we've heard the last few off seasons? Or do you think it's just the same situation they've been?
I'm disappointed. I think we were all so excited about Mark Gundy because we saw how good he was at. He won the FCS equivalent of the Heisman last season and then transferred in. So I think we were all super excited about him coming in. Granted, it was week 1, but he was pretty bad last week, especially throwing the ball. And I don't know what it is.
He had 40 passing yards. Yeah,
I don't know what it is when you step into be an Iowa quarterback where you forget everything. But I'm disappointed that pass game is not what we thought it could be. None of us were expecting that Iowa was going to all of a sudden look like an air raid offense, but we were also like, man, if Iowa has a 25 points per game offense, they might be playoff contenders.
I don't know if they've got that in them after last week, but it was week 1, so we can't make the judgment. I think my X factor for this game, if I had to pick just one, it's going to be if Iowa State's linebackers can aid the defensive line in generating any sort of backfield pressure, whether it's in the run game or pass game. If they can stop Gronowski from dropping back, stop him from the QB run game, and get into the backfield, Iowa's going to be without their starting running back, Kamari Moulton, but they did have Xavier Williams, who looked fantastic last week. Lesser opponent, but he still looked really good, averaged over 10 yards a carry. If Iowa State's linebackers can get into the backfield, tackles for losses, or short yardage gains, force Iowa into these 3rd and 7s, 3rd and 8s, That's where you want to live. And if Iowa State's doing that, I don't think Iowa's going to score many points. I think it's safe to say that Rocco Becht in the passing game, they have good tight ends, good wide receivers. They're going to put up points. Maybe not 30 or 40, but they're going to score. And if they need to score, they have the offense to go down and get one. It's going to come down to Iowa State's linebackers. Can you get Iowa off the field? Can you get the ball back into Rocco Becht's hands? Because if Rocco Becht is sitting on the sidelines for 40 of the 60 minutes of that game, Iowa State, you're not going to put up a lot of points. But if Rocco Becht is out on the field for 40 of the 60 minutes, they might score 30. And I don't think Iowa's got the juice in them in that case to score 40, also, 30 plus points in those 20 minutes. Iowa State's linebackers, you are my X factor of this game. Depending on how you play, I think is what's going to turn this game over one way or the other.
I think I don't want to I don't want to decide Iowa's fate just based off of last week being a negative in people's eyes in terms of their pass game. I will say, I thought what you said of this is the first time this game's kind of been in the national media's eyes. It's not just because the week 2 slate's quote unquote weaker than last week. I think it's also people are excited about Rocco Becht and Matt Campbell. People are excited that Iowa might have a quarterback. Now, last week kind of dismayed a lot of those hopes, but this is also a big rivalry game that has intrigue on both sides. What I am curious about, it's the same thing. It's the same key to every Iowa game, I feel like, for the last 7 years. Can they have a complementary offense? And I'm not even saying can they score 20, but can they keep control of the football instead of going 3 and out and relying on a punt god to flip the field? Can you at least keep the other offense off the field, keep them out of rhythm, and trust your defense to go make plays to set your offense up, be complementary? And I know that's such a cliche term in football and people hate it when you say complementary football, but that's how Iowa wants to play their games. That's how Kirk Ferentz tries to play, sets up his team too. Iowa State, on the other hand, I think that is something Matt Campbell has perfected. You said they're probably not going to score 30, but that's because Matt Campbell's game script doesn't necessarily say they need to. There's some coaches, some programs out there that need to score 30 because either the way they coach their offense consistently gets their defense back on their field and just leads to more points being scored on either side, or because their defense is just bad. Matt Campbell built that team to be solid everywhere around. Maybe not elite everywhere, but solid everywhere around. And his game script is always, let's be smart with the football, get downfield, score at least 3, if not get into the end zone, and play solid ball. This is a game that, ironically, Iowa State has not. I think you and I both lean in a similar fashion here, but this is also a game that Iowa State has not been extremely uber successful in. Like most people, if you woke up today as a college football fan, you would assume that. The last 20 years or so, Iowa has won a good amount of them, or at least covered a pretty good amount of them. So I'm not going to discount Iowa's chances in this game because Markinowski could have just needed a week 2 jump. Markinowski could have just needed all right, that was my first game with my new team. Let's see what we go from here. Iowa's defense is still going to be good. Iowa's running game should be good. Maybe a step back because of the injury, but still should be good. So I'm not going to discount Iowa's chances in this game whatsoever.
Yeah, I think that's very fair. And one last note, and we'll make our picks again later. Iowa State has not won a CyHawk game, and thank you, Logan, for this, in Ames since 2011. It's been 14 years since Iowa State has won a home game in the CyHawk. They've won the last 2 games over in Iowa City playing against Iowa, have not won in Ames since 2011. So if Matt Campbell can get it done, this would be pretty special.
Before we move on, I do have a question for you. Last week, we saw Kansas State need a last-minute touchdown to beat North Dakota. Iowa State, on the other hand, crushed South Dakota. Now, the only reason I'm bringing up those 2 teams is those 2 teams played in Farmageddon 2 weeks ago against in Ireland. It was clear last week that Kansas State had a jet lag of sorts type of performance. Is there any chance that Iowa State was hyped on the win, came home, kept it rolling, And heading into this rivalry game, there is a bit of jet lag, a bit of fatigue, a bit of, oh my God, we have 3 straight weeks and we went to Ireland 2 weeks ago.
I think when it comes to rivalry games, especially one this heated, I think that you're so much adrenaline pumping and you want it so badly that any sort of jet lag or tiredness is pretty wiped out.
Probably, yeah.
I think these kids are just so fired up. A lot for both these programs. A lot of these high school kids, almost all of their kids they recruit out of high schools are from Iowa or states touching Iowa. I think all these kids want this badly. They've all grown up in and around the rivalry. They've all probably been fans of their school that they're at now, lifelong. I think there's enough passion, energy, adrenaline, enough wanting it so badly that I don't think Iowa State's going to feel it. I also think what happened with the way you saw the two programs go after playing each other, a lot of that I think is culture and coaching. I think I think things have gone around Kansas State internally, coaching wise, whatever it might be, with Avery Johnson's dad and brother that I think culturally just led them to kind of a stinker, and they need to figure out how to get back on track and how to figure themselves out. But I think Matt Campbell and Iowa State, granted, it helps when you win that game, but I think there's a culture set of like moving forward, taking one game at a time, taking care of your opponent, and really kind of driving forward. We've seen that out of Matt Campbell the last few years. I think having Rocco Becht be this like 5th-year leader that you have also kind of aids in that as well.
I completely agree with you on just the fact that it's a rivalry game. It's really easy to get your team up for that. Now, next week they play Arkansas State. I don't expect them to struggle against that, but they are going on the road for some reason to Arkansas
That could be
State.
the jet lag game.
And that could be the jet lag game. Yeah.
You play Farmageddon in Ireland, you come back, you get a tune-up game, you put all your energy in the CyHawk, and then that could be the maybe throw a little money on Arkansas State to cover in that game.
I was gonna say that might be my shot in the bark next week. Not Arkansas State to win, but to cover, because that's after Farmageddon and a rivalry game and a game in between. And they're going on the road. All right, I think I got my shot in the bark next week. Speaking of shot in the bark, Jace, take it away. Obviously, I think we should still explain the rules.
Yep. Quick breakdown. Same as earlier. So 1 point if they cover, 2 points additionally if they win. So you can get 0 if nothing good happens for you. 1 point if they cover, 3 points if they win, because you get the 2 and the 1. Your dog has to be 8.5 points or greater favorite. So basically more than a score. Farbode, this was a tough slate. I think when I was looking through it, and I know we talked about it, we only found out each other's picks right before the show, but when we were looking through, there's just most of the matchups this week are like 38-point favorites for, these Power 4 schools playing, what did you call it? No-name university. So those are impossible to pick. So I was like trying to find any sort of game that I felt like I could find an edge on. I found what I hope is an edge in UAB at Navy. Navy is 21.5-point favorites. I'm going to be with the Blazers here. 21.5 is a lot of points for a team that doesn't really throw the football, was kind of my first thoughts. Also, UAB's offense was pretty electric last week. They were able to throw the ball and run the ball. A big thing for me why I picked them was Alabama State is who UAB played, not a great program. Put up a lot of points on UAB, which made me a little nervous. But they did most of that damage, if not all of it, through the air. Navy's not as much of a scare to have an air raid style offense that UAB just saw. I don't know enough about UAB, so this is my gut feeling based on a box score and a little bit of reading. If UAB's issue is their pass defense, then 21.5 points against Navy should hopefully aid them a little bit into covering, if not winning that outright. Also, just kind of something fun for UAB. Trent Dilfer's going into year 3 there.
Yeah.
NFL fan, you probably know Trent Dilfer. He had a long career in the NFL. He's been on analyst, I believe, on ESPN for a little bit too. He's going on year 3 at UAB. He had a rough first 2 years. Was on the hot seat this offseason. They decided to give him one more season, so he's on contract for this season here. I think he has something to prove. I think he's 1-0. Their defense didn't look great last week. Their offense looked really good. I think he's in. I don't want to say a must-win game, but I think he wants to prove it to himself, to UAB. Save his career. I can go out and win one game that I'm not supposed to. I'm hoping it's this week. At least cover for me, Trent. But I'm going the Blazers plus 21.5 at.
I like that. I think Navy's one of those teams that it's just so hard to pick for or against. I normally stay away from their games just because I don't know what version of that team I'm going to get. Not even year in, year out, week in, week out. But I like that pick. My pick might be, Jace, would you say this is my favorite underdog team of the year, or is it like Georgia Tech that's my favorite?
I think it's the Yellow Jackets for you, but I do think this team is a close second. I'll give you both. I think I'll give you two underdog teams of the year. I think it's
I've been
Georgia
on
Tech
Alex
and this team.
Golesh. I've been on the Alex Golesh train since we started this podcast. That's all I know. So without giving it away, but giving it away, my shot in the bark this week is South Florida, who's a 17.5-point underdog against Florida. Now, listen, we're not necessarily expecting winners out of this segment. We're expecting teams to cover. 17.5 is a great spread. I love Alex Golesh and Byron Brown and everything they got going on in South Florida. I think that was one of the first picks you and I made before we even recorded the podcast before week 0 of Alex Golesh covering the 6 against Boise State. I think that offense has the potential to score on Florida. Look, for me, the key of that game is Florida's defense for real. Because if they are for real, then they should shut them out. I don't really take much from Florida's game against Long Island University, where they put up like 450 yards offensively through 3 quarters. They destroyed Long Island. The only thing I guess you can take away is Florida is an offense that works. Now, what worries me in general is neither of us were really high on Boise State, and especially their offense this year, especially without Ashton Genty or their motor. Now we got they played pretty well against a Maddox Matson led Boise State offense. I don't know how that's going to translate to a DJ Lagway led Florida offense. I still think, though, South Florida could do some pretty cool, pretty special things this year. I think my shot in the bark for this week is to take them to cover the 17.
I like that. If Florida's defense is not up to par with where a lot of people think that it might be, Byron Brown has the ability to score a lot of points and pick it apart. He looked like he was playing 2 levels above Boise State's defense, which probably means he's going to be about on par with where we expect Florida's defense to be. And if Florida's defense isn't quite there, he could put up enough points to keep them in this game. We know Alex Golesh and that USF defense was much improved. It looked like, at least against Boise State, than it was last year. They could easily hang around. Also, you have to imagine when you're playing an in-state rival, there's a lot of energy and just kind of rivalryness that goes into that usually evens things out. Also, it looks like it might be raining in Gainesville for that game, which you never know what's going to happen in the rain. Usually that favors the team who's not supposed to win. So I think there's a chance where that happens. There's also a world where Florida is the team that Florida believes it can be. And if that happens, good luck, Alex Golesh, and stay healthy, Byron Brown.
Yeah, I think Byron Brown, if Georgia Tech is my favorite team and Florida and USF isn't of the smaller teams in the country, I would say that Byron Brown is both of our favorite quarterbacks in the country that no one's talking about. He's pretty special.
He's so fun to watch.
Last week against Boise State, I think they just needed the fake punt. Like, he struggled a little bit at the beginning. We don't need to rehash that, but they needed the fake punt, and all of a sudden, him and that offense clicked, and they just pulled away from Boise State. I think that could happen in this game of staying in it, especially with the rain that you mentioned. It's going to be kind of fun. Also kind of fun is you hear the big news from this week. It's funny. This is what we talked about at the beginning. For some reason, weeks like this that people talk about how the slate's not great. College football gives us a reason why that's wrong. This week, Mike Gundy, Oklahoma State head coach. Oklahoma State's playing Oregon this Saturday. Oklahoma State's a 28.5-point dog against Oregon in Eugene this Saturday. Mike Gundy went on his radio show, his coach's show, and he had a lot to say. So first, he said, I think Oregon spent close to $40 million last year alone. Now, I might be off a few million. First of all, no one's ever reported that. Don't get me wrong. They probably were in the 20s, maybe 15. But I think the teams that were in the 40s, Texas, Ohio State, those were reported. And the other big media talking heads who are actually in the game and in the know have talked about this already. And they've said the same thing of no one ever said that Oregon was in the 40s. Mike Gundy just wants to say Mike Gundy things. And then at one point during the press conference, I don't know if you watched it, Jace, he lifted his shirt up and flashed the camera for no reason. Pretty hilarious. And then He goes, Oregon is paying a lot of their money, a lot of money for their team. From a non-conference standpoint, there's coaches saying they should play teams with similar budgets. He went on to bash the Oregon money, talking about Dante Moore, saying he's a good player. He's a really good player, but there's people around Oregon that feel like that he may be one of the best to ever play there before he leaves. So it'll cost a lot of money for them to keep him. Basically, just Mike Gundy spent this entire week admitting jealousy, essentially, over the Oregon financial situation that they have. Dan Lanning, probably one of the quotes of the year, said, if you want to be a top 10 team in college football, you better be invested in winning. We spend to win. Some people save to have an excuse for why they don't. I can't speak on their situation. I have no idea what they got in their pocket. Where do you want to start on this? Like, I know you got to
start here with Dan Lanning. Best response from Dan Lanning. Don't stoop down to that level and bash Oklahoma State or bash their pocket or make up a fake number to make yourself sound better, to make somebody look worse. I thought he handled that perfectly. Defended his program, defended his guys, didn't stoop to his level, but still gave like a great back off comment. I can almost guarantee, similar to the Deion Colorado game a few years ago, and he had the pregame speech of they're fighting for clicks. I think we're going to get something like that prior to this game, and Oregon is going to. This is one of those games where I already thought Oregon was probably going to win by 30 to 35 points. They're just a much better team, better coach, better players, better scenario. I have a strong feeling that after these comments, when Oregon is up 35-0 at halftime, it is not going to be over for Oregon. It's going to be 0-0 in the second half. I think Mike Gundy dug his grave and then gave Dan Lanning the shovel and $100 to go buy the rest of the dirt to bury it, because I don't know why he gave Oregon more motivation than he needed to. I also think there's some truth to what Dan Lanning is saying. I think Mike Gundy's just setting up an excuse. So when they get their butts kicked, he can cite money and he doesn't have to cite that he's doing a bad job or that he's lost the program, because Oklahoma State's fallen off the last couple of years. And, there's a lot of programs who don't have deep pockets, who have stayed in it and who have kept a good program running. Oklahoma State not being one of them. Also, just I'll stop there. I'll let you give your take.
So I got to start by saying Mike Gundy is a very good football coach, and has had to be for
Used to be.
Maybe not a good program leader, good football coach. But what I have a problem in it is exactly what you said. Number one, this is so he can have an excuse to tell his boosters, his donors, his fans, his athletic director, his wife, I don't know, about why they lost by however many they lost by. And it's a way to get ahead of it. This is a quote by a coach who knows he's about to get destroyed and wants to provide reason beforehand about why he's getting destroyed. This is also a coach who, I'm going to shout out another podcast, Andy and Ari, you and I listen. They had him on during Big 12 Media Days, and Mike Gundy had some pretty revealing statements about how he's coached Oklahoma State the last couple of years. At first, he basically, when NIL first started, they basically didn't do anything, hoping it would go away. They didn't take part in NIL. They didn't take part in the transfer portal because they assumed it would go away. Mike Gundy said last year, 2 years ago, they didn't take any transfers of note. This past offseason, going into this year, was the first year they put a lot of money into their bringing players in rather than using NIL to amongst their players within the program. So I can't take a guy seriously who is late to react and now wants to push away the reasons that he's failed his program. Mike Gundy, I will say, like you said, used to be a good head coach. I think he loves football. He's a good head coach at heart. I think he's one of those coaches that doesn't love where college football is right now because it doesn't set him up to succeed anymore. I think the other aspect of it is Oklahoma State is probably the last program in the country that can bash Oregon for not having money. Oklahoma State, before Phil Knight was Phil Knight, Oklahoma State had T. Boone Pickens. And T. Boone Pickens passed away. that money has dried up a little bit, but he really helped elevate that program from irrelevance to being a regular contender. Last year, they were picked to finish third in the Big 12. They finished last 0-9 in the Big 12.
Yeah, dead last.
That's a failure to adapt. There's so many places we can take this. I think, like you said, this gives Dan Lanning a way to motivate his team if he didn't have one already. I also think, I mean, this is just one of those games that you scheduled it, brother. Like Mike
Yeah,
Gundy,
that's the
you
craziest
were
part.
the head coach when they scheduled this game. So why are we complaining about this now?
That part is interesting to me. Like, Dan Lanning was not at Oregon when this game was scheduled. Mike Gundy was at Oklahoma State. And it's not like Oregon like called the NCAA was like, give me Oklahoma State this week right now. Like, this was set, like when you mentioned, when this thing was made, Oklahoma State was a wealthier program financially than Oregon is now, than Oregon was then. And they're probably, I could have been where they're at Oregon now. Like you said, they just didn't capitalize on the opportunity with NIL that they had. And I think the argument of, is this where college football should be in the grand scheme of things, is a whole different conversation. The truth is, college football is where it's at right now. And that's just how it is. Whether we like it or not, whether we agree with it or not, different conversation. It is where it is right now.
You better
And
get
Dan
on the
Lanning and
bus
the
or you're going to be
Ducks,
left behind. That's
exactly.
I'm
That's the
sorry
bottom
for the
line.
interruption, but it's like
No,
bottom
that's
line.
the bottom line.
Dan Lanning always says, you better, once again, I recognize that Jason and I might be biased here, but I also think this is just a general perception of the situation. You better adapt. Dan Lanning always says, adapt or die. Dan Lanning always says, I don't really care about what's changing in college football. I don't want to give you an opinion on that. What I'm trying to figure out is how to adapt to it to be the best one in the country at doing whatever the changes are. That's a guy that's on the bus, willing to go with it. Or there are some guys in college football, Mike Gundy included, that appear not to be willing to be left behind.
And they're paying the price for it. And Oklahoma State, I think, is gonna feel that one on Saturday, unfortunately for them.
Yeah.
Calling out Dante Moore. Dante Moore is gonna just feast, I think, now on the Oklahoma State. So that'll be interesting.
I think the Dante Moore jab was more of a jab to get back at the Oregon money thing. I don't think, like, at his heart, Mike Gundy would want to jab an actual 20-year-old kid. Like, I think it was Mike Gundy's been around the block. He knows how to take jabs at people. He knows how to talk in press conferences and radio shows. So he's saying he's a good player, and talking about how good they're saying he's going to be, and then all of a sudden, Enio with, well, it'll cost a lot of money to keep him. Like that goes back to bashing Oregon again for no reason. I do have to point out one thing. Some of this was taken out of context with the way an Oregon reporter reported what Mike Gundy was saying, and then Dan Lanning was asked about it. So it seemed like there's a lot more turmoil where, yes, both coaches said what they did, but I don't think in general it's going to change the outcome of the game. If it changes the winner, I would be shocked, like, of who we think is going to win. I also, this game's not part of our picks. I'm right there with you. I would put money down that Oregon's going to win and cover the 28.5. You know how much I hate big spreads, but I think this game is going to give Dan Lanning the sicko mode version of his pregame speeches, pregame motivations, and they're just going to come out with their hair on fire. It's just a ridiculous statement. And the last question I guess I'll have for you, unless you had anything on this.
Hit me with it.
The fact is, Dan Lanning's quote that says, we spend to win, and if you want to be a top 10 team in college football, you got to spend. There's a, I don't know, double-edged sword there. Because, like you said, you got to adapt to this mode of college football. It doesn't matter what you want college football to be anymore. But it's funny that Dan Lanning is like, does he recognize that he's just lucky enough to be at a place that is willing and has the resources to spend to be a top 10 head coach? Because I think you and I and everyone in the country would put him in our top head coaches around college football. Does he recognize, do you even know what I'm saying? Like,
I think I know what you're trying to say. I don't know if I'd call it luck. I think he's one, when he was coming out as a coach, like to be a head coach, he had pretty good options of where he wanted to go. And I have to imagine he had an honest conversation with himself and his wife and what's best for our family, what's best for a future, what are my goals, where am I going to take that? I have to imagine he thought pretty in depth about the decision he made and chose Oregon with some sort of intention of why he was going there. He's also a very motivated, and he's a good salesman, like truly he is. And I think part of that is being a salesman for your program and your school, saying we need money, we need funding, this is what it takes to get to where we want to be. And I think that's part of the head coach's job nowadays. And like you said, whatever the rules are, he wants to adapt and be the best at it. I think he does work hard to get money from the school and the program, and he's also very gracious. We've heard him say a million times, "I'm so blessed to be at a university that invests. I'm so blessed to have people that care." He's I think he's acknowledged it enough that I don't know if I'd call it luck. Like I don't think he just woke up one day and was like, "Oh crap!" Like, dude, this is awesome.
Yeah.
I think he made a lot of decisions and put a lot of effort into being at the program that he's at and like to get in the program to where he wants it to be. I think a lot of that was intentional from his end.
I guess no. So yeah, I'm not saying he hasn't earned being the head coach of Oregon. I absolutely am not saying that, and not saying that he doesn't work hard. I think my question in general is more of the fact that like there are coaches around the country, Mike Gundy may be one of them, that are just resentful because maybe a guy like Mike Gundy wants to adapt. Maybe a guy like Mike Gundy wants to, but he knows that college football has passed Oklahoma State by. I'm not saying it has, but maybe he feels that way. And then he sees a team like Oregon who are in the position they are because they can invest in their program. And I feel like there are coaches around the country that are given top 10 head coach in the country, top 5 head coach in the country labels, who may not be at that position or in that place on that list if they were coaching an Oklahoma State level fundraise team rather than an Oregon level fundraise team. Does that make more
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah, I think as a coach in today's era of college football, part of your job is bringing in money through boosters and
Exactly.
through NIL collectives. And I think like a guy like Mike Gundy, as he even admitted himself, he thought it was not real. He did not adapt. He did not put in the effort, the time, the energy, the foresight, the research, the studying to adapt to current college football. And he's paying the price for it. And I think instead of owning up to it and in this press conference saying, yeah, we have oil money. We're Oklahoma State. We actually have some of the richest alumni in the country, and him attacking it and maybe admitting that he had messed up or trying to figure out a way to get it. He's just making excuses for his losses. I think that's on the head coach and not so much on the program. I think that what we think as fans, I'm trying to think how to word this. I think as fans, we see NIL as like these schools are rich, these schools are poor, and that's how it is. I think realistically speaking, any of these schools could be rich or poor, depending on how much they can go to their alumni and actually sell their program and sell their team to the conference, to TV markets, to bigger conferences, their boosters and NIL collectives and alumni. Obviously, there's schools that just like an Ohio State I won't throw Oregon in there because they're like newer to college football in terms of being good. Someone like Ohio State or Georgia, you've been good for so long. You've just been enriched into college football so much so that you're going to have that NIL unless you really botch type coaching. A program like Oregon they were a no-name program until the early 2000s, and they kind of came onto the scene. Oklahoma State was a better program for longer and has more wealthy alumni and has access to more money. They just haven't drawn it out yet. And I don't think that's luck or bad luck. I just think that's failure to adapt versus adapting really well.
To your point, I think all you have to do, I know Dion's a very special case because of who he is and the gravitas he brings, but look at what his effort has brought to Colorado. Look at what Kurt Signetti, because he's coached SIG, has brought to Indiana. Look at what Kenny Dillingham did in his opening press conference at Arizona State, saying we need this much NIL. He didn't shy away from it in his opening press conference after the boosters agreed to pay for him to be hired there. We need this much NIL to be moderately competitive. Look at there's so many
Mike
cases.
Elko at Duke even got them to cough up some cash, which that was a football program most people didn't even know existed until Mike Elko got there.
There's so many programs. For me, there's no reason a team like Oklahoma State has to be worse than a team like Kansas. There's no reason a team like Kansas basketball is very known, obviously, but a lot of their money in NIL is going to go towards basketball. It's not going to go towards football. Kansas. And then what about if you want to go out of conference, like even like Mississippi State? You're telling me that they have more opportunity to bring in NIL and fundraising opportunities uh, than Oklahoma State does? No, I think it's just like you said, exactly what you said. It's an effort thing, and today's job description for a college football head coach is less about actually coaching games or players. It's more about how do we bring opportunities and finances to our team and let and try to keep
You got to be a
getting better
salesman
players.
now.
Exactly. All that said, I got Oregon to cover 20.5 in that game.
Yeah.
I think you do too.
Yep.
We got some fun games to just quickly talk about before we get into our picks. Fun games, number one for me, Georgia Southern's going to USC. USC's a 24.5-point favorite, 7:30 Eastern on Saturday. Why is this a fun game? Well, Clay Helton makes his return to USC. Clay Helton's the head coach at Georgia Southern. If you thought he disappeared right after he got fired at USC, he did not. He took the Georgia Southern job. I think he almost beat Nebraska in Matt Rule's year one, or maybe that was Scott Frost's last year. I forget what it was, but Clay Helton's heading back to USC, and I'm hoping that he does everything he can to cover that spread against USC. But I feel like there's a reason he got fired from there.
Yeah, and USC looked good last week, but that is a hilarious reunion. Not a warm welcomed one, I don't think.
No, I really want to know what USC fan reactions are to it. Do you got any game?
All right, I think this is an underrated one. Not a lot of people are talking about the border war between Kansas and Missouri. At Missouri this year, two really good quarterbacks. You have Jalen Daniels for Kansas, and you've got Bo Pribula from Missouri. I think you have two underrated programs right now, two underrated quarterbacks. In a weekend that on paper doesn't look as hot or exciting, if you want to watch good football, a rivalry game, high energy, good quarterback play, probably high scoring, give the border war a watch. It's at 3:30 Eastern. I think it's going to be a good game. This should be a fun one.
We got two rivalry games this weekend. We got this game and we got the CyHawk game. I mean, for anyone who was bashing this week's slate, there are some important games in terms of just fan interest. So make sure you're tuned in. The other one is Ole Miss going back for revenge against Kentucky. Kentucky was one of the reasons Ole Miss was held out of the playoffs last year. And Ole Miss is a 10-point favorite on the road on Saturday. They would pretty comfortably take Ole Miss on that 10 points. And
yeah. Kentucky looked awful last week. I only know that because Toledo was my shot in the bark last week. Kentucky looked awful. We could have. I mean, last year, Jackson Dart and Ole Miss looked really good. They had a home game against a Kentucky team that nobody thought was any good, and Kentucky won that one. I have to imagine Lane Kiffin has learned his lesson though. He also, maybe he's eyeing that Alabama job. If Twitter Alabama fans are in charge there, then I think Lane Kiffin might have an interview coming up.
Did you see the spread? Like the odds that for like someone's already released odds for the next Alabama head coach.
Yeah, that was hilarious.
I thought it was interesting.
A little premature, but it's funny.
I thought it was interesting. Dan Lanning wasn't on there.
Finally, man, that was good to see. Lane Kiffin was one of the higher. I can't remember who was number one. He was up there. John Gruden, I saw, was up there. Tommy Rees was up there.
Sign me up for a John Gruden coached Alabama team. That is the only. Yeah. All right, we've gone a little off the rails. Jace, let's get into our week 2 picks. Lead us into it.
All right, so we've already broken the game down, so we'll go through quickly. Michigan at Oklahoma, almost 6.5 point favorites. Saturday, 7:30 Eastern on ABC. That's College Game Day. I'm gonna roll with Michigan. I think in the rain. We'll see if Ben Arbuckle's learned his lesson about learning to run the football. If Jay Knott's not healthy, I don't know if they can do that against Michigan. I think Bryce Underwood in Michigan keeps it close. I don't know if they're going to come out with the win, but I think they keep it close.
One quick note before I think we forgot to say it. We're picking against the spread. We're not necessarily picking to win.
Good call.
Ironically, on that note, I'm going to take Oklahoma. I think that offense is killer, and Brent Venables is going to do his damnedest to confuse the heck out of Bryce Underwood. And that's not going to mean anything bad for Bryce Underwood, but that also is going to mean he's a young quarterback that hasn't had a lot of experience against top-tier SEC or Big Ten competitors. Brent Venables is going to try to make it hard for anyone to be open. I got Oklahoma covering that spread. So we're on opposite sides of this. And also, before we move to the next game, remember, I am 7-3 heading into this week. You are 5-5. You're trying to catch up. I mean, I'm not that far away.
I need to play catch up here.
But it's important to point that out when we are on opposite sides of these games. So I got Oklahoma -6.5. You got Michigan +5, +6.5. Do you have Michigan to win? Actually, it doesn't matter at that point, right?
I think the Sooners are going to win this game, but I think it'll come down to, I hate the 6.5 because it could give me a touchdown there. Yeah. I'm screwed. But I think it'll come down to like a one possession game.
With my luck, it's going to end 27-21. I know Oklahoma's going to win, but you're going to cover the 6.5. Next game, Iowa State. Iowa State's a 1.5 point favorite. Saturday, 12 Eastern on Fox. Go for it.
I'm going to roll with the Cyclones, and I feel comfortable about this one. I think the Cyclones win. I think this is one of the more lopsided CyHawk games that we see in quite some time.
Yeah, I see like a 31-17 game coming, or a 28-14, 28-17 game coming. I don't know. For a lot of people around the country, that doesn't sound like lopsided, but for these two, it is. The last time I go back, I don't know the exact stat. Last time Iowa lost by more than 3 in this game, it had to be, I think, maybe about as long as you and I have been alive.
Probably longer, honestly.
Maybe. So we're both on the same side there. Iowa State. What's the next game, Jace?
All right, we got Baylor at SMU. Baylor, tough. Applaud them for a great early season out of conference schedule, but man, that's rough. SMU is 2.5 point favorites at home Saturday at noon Eastern on the CW. Disrespectful. That's a good game. I'm going to roll with SMU. I believe in Kevin Jennings, and then they have a 3-headed monster at running back. They have Derek McFall, CJ 2K Jr., Chris Johnson Jr. on the squad, had a good week last week, and then TJ Harden. I like their ability to run the rock. I think if they can run the ball well between Kevin Jennings and those 3 running backs, keep Sawyer Robertson off the field, keep the Baylor offense off the field, I think they can pull this one out. Big recruiting implications, too, in this game. Battle of 2 Texas schools.
Also, if you were watching week 1 and you saw one of the reasons that Auburn did beat Baylor, Baylor couldn't stop the run whatsoever.
No, and my goodness.
If you have a premonition that SMU is going to win this game, they better just run until Baylor stops them. On the other hand, last week I had Auburn to cover and beat Baylor. I was right about that. But the problem with that, and you and I talked about before we started recording, I was watching the Baylor offense. I was like, this is fun. I wish I was on Baylor's side, but I picked Auburn. I was happy that they won. Yeah, I think Baylor is going to win and cover this game. I am on opposite sides, and I will also go down to say if I win a second straight Baylor game, I think you might need to just join me on the ride from here on out. You can't be on opposite
with
sides.
Baylor. Baylor was in my like, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. I was like, I can't get burnt picking. If I pick Baylor again and they don't cover again, I'm gonna be so mad. So I was like, I can live in a world where Baylor beats me, but I'm not letting Baylor lose for me again. So I also had to pick SMU for that.
Yeah. That's just one of those games that like.
It feels like I pick wrong whatever I pick. That's how that game feels.
There's very real reason for SMU to just kick them out, kick their ass. Baylor can't stop the run. Brett Lashley's such a good coach that he's just going to trust the run game and just going to keep going at them until it's a game situation and a game score that Baylor just can't overcome. But yeah, opposite sides there. What do we got next?
All right, we have Illinois. They're 3.5 point favorites at Duke. This is also a Saturday noon game. This will be on ESPN. I'm very much looking forward to this one. I think this is going to be a very close game. Illinois kind of coming into the year with a good amount of hype. Duke was a little quiet coming into the year, but they looked really good last week. Darian Mensah at quarterback had a phenomenal week last week, throwing for, I believe, well over 300 yards. He was up there with John Mateer in like best quarterback performances in week 1. I'm going to roll with Illinois. It's Farvote, little quick change of pick there. I like that. I'm going to roll with Illinois. I'm going to trust in Luke Altmaier. They have a good run game with Caden Fagan and Aiden Lafferty. And then I like their star wide receiver this year, Hank Beatty. Looks like he's going to pick up right where Pat Bryant left off. I'm going to trust Bielema and this core of like older, experienced players. I am nervous. I think this to me is like the border war game where you have two really good quarterbacks, and you're going to be in for a treat. And like this is Luke Altmaier also looked good, so it's not going to be like Kate Klubnik, Garrett Nussmeier. It's like, really, this is what you guys are doing. I finally feel like this is going to be, oh man, both these teams are cooking. Who can finally get the stop? I think it's a chess match. I do hate the 3.5. I will say, if it's 2.5, I feel very good about Illinois. I'm assuming the 3.5 is what tilted you onto the Duke side. It's going to come down to something.
The half point is exactly what changed me to Duke. For for everyone who's not on our Google Doc, as Jay started talking, as Jay started talking about his Illinois pick, I changed my pick from Illinois to Duke. I just saw that 3.5 and I got a little jittery there. I think Duke is a home team. Duke is in year 2 of not rebuilding, but reloading with Manny Diaz. Mike Elko, as you mentioned earlier, did a really good job rebuilding that program. And Manny Diaz is
not
trying
even
to take it to the next,
just building
that program. And Manny Diaz is trying to take it to the next level. I think both teams are very solid. Darian Mensah kind of worried us last week at the beginning. They were tied at half against Elon, but they pulled away hard in the second half against Elon. I kind of expect maybe that was something clicking in their offense with a new quarterback. That might be a difference maker in this game. The other part of it for me is Illinois. Look, I'm not doubting that they could win the game. I had them as my pick up until 3 minutes ago. I just think Illinois is one of those teams that we know who they are. They've been the team for 3 years now, 2 years now. While that's really good because they're seniors and they're all experienced and developed, they also have a ceiling. I don't know who's going to win this game. I don't know who's going to cover. I changed my pick to Duke because of the half point on the 3.5. We're on opposite sides now for 3 of the 4 picks. Our rankings are going to change. I might take a bigger lead, or you might overtake me.
I'm excited for it. And then our final game, so pick number 5, kind of a fun one. It was a fun game last year for the very few people who watched it. Boston College at Michigan State, 7:30 Eastern on NBC. This is a fun one. I think this is I thought last year this was a Thomas Castellanos Boston College team. It was a game where Michigan State looked like the better team and dominated for 59 minutes and 59 seconds. But one way or another, somehow, some way, like seriously, if you can watch the replay of this game, I think I was one of 15 people watching it on the CW last year or on Peacock. I think it was on Peacock, one of the two.
I was one of the other ones.
It was one of those games, if you watched it and didn't see the score of the whole game, you're like, oh, Michigan State's got to be up 35-7. And you're like, wait, Boston College was up 17-4. How did that happen? It was one of those games last year. I think Boston College is a little worse than they were last year. I think Michigan State's a lot better than they were last year. I think Aiden Childs is going to take a big step up this season. The game against Western Michigan was an interesting one. The box score, I don't think, shows how dominant Michigan State was. They finally have the running game that they've been missing since Mark D'Antonio left with Frazier and Tulis. And then their wide receiver core is really good this year. You got year 2 of Nick Marsh, who was really undershadowed as a freshman last year because you had Ryan Williams, Jeremiah Smith, Cam Coleman, go down the list. Nick Marsh was just as good as any of them, played on a little bit less known and worse of a team, so he didn't get the buzz that I think he deserves. Then they brought on Krishan McCray out of Kent State, who was a 1,000-yard receiver last year, and Amari Kelly, who looked really good in week 1. Plus, you get a healthy Jack Belling, who's one of the better tight ends in the country. 2 years ago, was really good last year until he got hurt. He's back and fully healthy. I like where the Spartans are going. We're both big believers in Jonathan Smith and what he's building. This feels like one of those games that is a Jonathan Smith not get right because they're not wrong at the moment, but like, hey, I promise I got you guys. Like, I have this ship right. This could be one of those games for me where Michigan State wins by 20 or 30, and people are like, oh, shoot, the Spartans, Jonathan Smith's got them back. And I'm hoping, as a partial fan of Michigan State, that that's the case. But putting my objective brain forward, I do kind of break the game down.
So 99% of that, I completely agree with you. And the 1% was that I was the other viewer of that game last year of the 15. You and I were the 2 of the 15. Though I want to see chaos happen. And I think this is where I'm going to plant my flag of chaos. Dylan
Very fair.
Lonergan is the quarterback at Boston College. Last year for this game, it was Tommy Castellanos before he transferred to Florida State and beat Alabama last week.
For him.
He got benched last year by Bill O'Brien, too. Bill O'Brien's the head coach at Boston College. I don't expect a ton from them this year, but Dylan Lonergan, former 4-star quarterback, went to Alabama. I believe Bill O'Brien was the OC under when Dylan Lonergan got there, so they had a relationship prior to him becoming the quarterback of Boston College. This might be a spread thing because I agreed with everything. I love Marsh. I love Charles's future. I love Velling. I love Jonathan Smith's coach. Like, it's the 4.5 that gets me. And I don't know. Have you seen a lot of 4.5 spreads? I feel like it goes from like 1.5 to 3.5 for some games to 6.5, and then all of a sudden, if it's a big spread, it's like 10.5. Like 4.5 feels odd to me, and I don't know if that's like
spread.
I don't know if that's Vegas being like in the middle of like, oh, this is gonna be a blowout. To what if Bill O'Brien has a good game plan?
Yeah.
I still would take Michigan State to win this game. Last week, I don't want to say only, but they didn't finish the game. I think it was Western Michigan the way we all expected them to. I think they only scored like 23, 26 points.
All in the first half, too. It was a really dominant first half. You're like, oh, they might win 50-0. And then lay an egg in the second half. Just kind of rolled over, it looked like a little bit.
There's a chance that those problems see themselves come up again this year. I'll just take Boston College to cover the 4.5, Michigan State to win the game.
Yeah, and there's a world. The Aiden Childs experience is: are we going to get 350 yards and 5 touchdowns and 80 rushing yards and a touchdown? And he looks like the best quarterback you ever watched. Or are you going to get 2 late interceptions that are just huge mental mistakes into double coverage, and Michigan State goes from up 7 to down 7 within a matter of 5 game minutes because Childs threw 2 terrible picks? I'm banking on the fact that that's old Childs, young Childs. People forget he's like 19, 20 years old, but it's in him. That's why they lost last year. He had those bonehead picks late in the game. Hopefully he's escaped them. We are about to find out on Saturday.
Give me a 23-20 game. That covers both my bases there. All right, let's go for our
Michigan State game.
Let's go for our F4D parlay.
I like this. So we're 0 for 2 so far in the year, as I mentioned earlier. 5 for 8 on the legs. 4-legger again. We just need to hit 1. I mean, we're gonna say this every week. I feel good about this one. Yes. It's like when you're with your buddies at a bar and you're all drinking a little bit, and you're like, guys, this is the one. It's the most ridiculous bet you've ever heard.
Except we make these picks sober.
Yeah, hopefully that's good. So first pick, we're gonna be on the Ducks minus 28.5 against Oklahoma State. That's our first leg. A little bit of a homer pick, sure, but also I'll say this: we both watch so much Oregon football content, football itself. We could give you the depth chart and every single ranking of every recruit that we have on the team. The Ducks looked really good. I almost said Ducks looked really good in week 1. Granted, it was Montana State. I'd argue Montana State might even be better than Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State's without their starting quarterback. They're probably, I think, going to be out without their best defender if he is in trouble still. I think between that already, it was not going to be a close game. And then you factor in the whole Mike Gundy situation. I just think that's free ammo for a team that didn't need it. This is not a game Dan Lanning lets a team hang around. We've seen it once before. We've seen it twice before. It's not going to happen. Sorry, Oklahoma State. We're Ducks minus 28.5. I'll do the first 2, and then you're going to finish us off. So Houston minus 14 at Rice. That is going to be our second leg. Houston's a good team. We both believe in Houston, the direction they're headed. And as Josh Pate says, you don't lose to a team named after a food. So Houston at Rice. And Rice isn't a big travel. It's not a big travel thing for Houston. It's like they're going on a crazy road trip to go play Rice. I believe 14 points for a Power 4 school over a Group of 5 school just feels pretty generous. We're taking the Cougars there.
Our third leg of this parlay, we got the Kansas at Mizzou over 50.5. Look, I think all I need to say is Jalen Daniels, Bo Perbula, and those defenses in a rivalry game. This is either going to have a total of 28 because it's a disgusting rivalry game, or it's going to have a total of 59. There's no in between here. So we're going to have we are 2 for 2 on our over bets this week. So no, 1 for 2.
No,
I think we missed
Kansas State, Iowa State. It should
Damn
have.
it,
It should have hit. It should have hit.
that game should have hit, and we should have had our first parlay. So that's our third leg. Our fourth leg is maybe the most fun pick of the bunch. UNLV plus 3.5 against UCLA. First of all, UCLA agreeing to go on the road to UNLV. Second of all, I know Utah was my pick to win the Big 12, so I can't bash them for losing to Utah, but the manner in which they lost to Utah last week is pretty eye-opening to how down bad UCLA is. So we got UNLV plus 3.5, Kansas Mizzou game going over 50.5, Houston covering the 14 at Rice, and the Ducks covering 28.5 at Oklahoma versus Oklahoma State. This might hit, this might not, but it's going to give us a lot to talk about.
I'm excited. I feel really good about Kansas Missouri over. I feel really good about the Ducks 28.5. And if you know anything about me, I never bet like my Ducks money line or spreads. I just never touch them because I feel like I don't know. I'm one of those fans. I just don't like to do it. So the fact I'm doing it shows my confidence in it. Houston, UNLV, obviously we feel good about. We put it in there. But I think that's probably got the most variability just in terms of how much do you know truly about these, those 4 programs. Yeah. But I feel really good about the Ducks and the over on that.
Yeah. This isn't the biggest spread I've bet, but you know how I feel about big spreads. I try not to, but 28.5 is pretty massive. I feel pretty confident in them. Look, we're trying to get one parlay to hit this year. One parlay hitting will cover the money that we've spent on them all week, every week this year, and then maybe get us each a Chipotle burrito or something.
There you go. I like that.
Alrighty. Anything else that you want to preview before we move on?
I think we hit everything. We've previewed the big games. We got our shots in the bargain. I'm excited for Clay Helton versus USC. I don't think he's going to come out of that game very happy, but we shall see.
No. Alrighty. So on that note, please make sure you're following us on TikTok at Flagged4Discussion, on Twitter at F4Discussion, and you're on YouTube. Subscribe to us at Flagged4Discussion, and on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, Flagged4Discussion as well. Look, we are 2 weeks in. Bit of housekeeping. I will be out for our week 2 recap. And then we have a couple things coming up on both of our lives that we're going to be doing solo shows. But one thing you can count on is Flag4Discussion will be in your timeline twice a week, every week for the college football season. Whether it's just me, just Jace, or one of us and a friend, whoever it is, we'll be here. We'll be on time. And we'll be talking about our favorite sport you all love too. Thanks for tuning in. I'm so ready for week 2. From myself, for Bud Merkazi and Jace Hatfield. Thanks for tuning in.